Welcome to Stoned Stories with me, Paige. How are you? Whether you need an escape or just a moment to unwind, you're in the right place. Everyone loves a story, and everyone needs a break. So sit back and let me take you on a gemological journey. And while we're at it, let's get stoned. What if I told you that one of the rarest gemstones on Earth can only be found in a single mountainside in the entire world? A gemstone so blue that locals believed it came from the ocean itself. A stone connected to lost civilizations, psychic prophecies, Caribbean legends, and a mountain filled with thousands of hand-dug tunnels. A gem that looks like sunlight dancing across tropical water, yet born deep inside ancient volcanoes. Today, we're talking about Larimar, also known as the Atlantis Stone, the Dolphin Stone, the Mermaid Stone, and honestly, if there was ever a gemstone that looks like it belonged in a fantasy novel, it's this one. So grab your favorite smoke, your favorite snack, or just settle in wherever you are, because today, we're heading to the Dominican Republic to uncover the story of one of the strangest gemstones ever discovered. Before we talk history, mythology, or geology, I want you to picture this stone. It's one of my absolute favorite stones to wear because it makes me feel like I'm next to the ocean. It feels like I'm holding a piece of water in a mineral that I can wear and express myself through, and it's one of my favorite turquoisey bright blues that looks good in every moment and just brings energy to me. So I was so excited to get deeper and dive into the story behind Larimar. Imagine standing on a Caribbean beach. The water is bright turquoise. White waves are rolling onto the sand. The sun is reflecting off the surface. Now freeze that image. That's basically Larimar. Most pieces have swirling shades of blue, mixed with white ribbons and cloud-like pattern. Some stones look like aerial photographs of tropical islands. Others resemble waves frozen in time. It's one of those gemstones that almost doesn't look real. That beautiful white frothy waves that break onto the shoreline, that's what is stuck in these beautiful stones. It's that image, that freshness, that color. Nature made it that way. Larimar can appear in shades of light blue, sky blue, teal, greenish blue, and white. The most valuable variety is a deep, saturated blue, often called volcano blue. That's the stuff that collectors obsess over. Your lighter blues are more common, but even those have an unmistakable beauty. You'll rarely find a piece that is completely uniform. Instead, Larimar usually contains veins, wisps, spots, ribbons, and swirling patterns that make every stone unique and make every stone look like a piece of that wave crashing onto the shore. No two pieces look exactly alike, which is probably why people became so obsessed with collecting it. Now let's get a little more gem nerdy. Because whenever I mention Larimar to non-gem people, they usually assume it's some kind of turquoise. It has that really vibrant, dense blue in it, but it's not. Larimar is actually a variety of a mineral called pectolite. And if you're sitting there wondering, Paige, what the hell is pectolite? Fair question. Pectolite is a hydrated sodium calcium silicate. Normally, it's gray, white, or colorless. Pretty boring. But in one tiny corner of the Dominican Republic, something unusual happens. Copper found its way into the crystal structure, and that copper is responsible for Larimar's incredible blue coloration. Without copper, there's no Larimar, just ordinary pectolite, which means the gemstone exists because nature accidentally got the recipe exactly right one time, and apparently never repeated it anywhere else on Earth. This is where the story gets really wild. Larimar is not simply rare because there's not much of it. It's rare because the conditions needed to create it were absurdly specific. About 25 million years ago, the Caribbean region was a very different place. Volcanoes were active, tectonic plates were shifting. The islands themselves were still taking shape. Deep underground, magma pushed upward through the crust, and as it cooled, cavities formed inside volcanic rocks. Mineral-rich water moved through those spaces, carrying dissolved elements, some including copper. Over immense stretches of time, those minerals moving through those little cavities began to crystallize. Tiny, fibrous crystals formed, and those crystals then started merging together. They were basically gluing themselves together as they were hardening, and then eventually they became Larimar. Geologists believe the exact combination of volcanic rock, copper-rich groundwater, temperature, pressure, and timing has never occurred anywhere else in quite the same way, which explains why Larimar only exists in one location on Earth. Not one country, not one region, it's one location. Larimar is the trademark name for the blue variety of silicate mineral pectolite found only in the Dominican Republic. However, there are small deposits of comparable but lesser quality silicate mineral, and it's been discovered in other parts of the world, including the Bahamas, the United States, and some European countries. But really, a stone beloved globally is found exclusively, and that's almost unheard of in the gemstone world altogether. Larimar is found on the island of Hispaniola, the Caribbean island shared today by the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And as that name sounds familiar from history class, it's because Hispaniola was the first island Christopher Columbus landed on during his infamous voyage across the Atlantic in 1492. That landing would forever alter the history of the Caribbean. Long before European ships appeared on the horizon, the island was home to thriving indigenous cultures, including the Taíno people who had lived throughout the region for centuries. It's fascinating to think that while explorers, conquerors, and empires would eventually fight over this island, deep within its volcanic mountains sat one of the world's rarest gemstones, completely unknown to the outside world. Long before Europeans arrived in the Caribbean, the Taíno lived throughout the Caribbean and had deep spiritual connections to the natural world. While archaeological evidence is limited, local traditions suggest they were familiar with unusual blue stones found in the region. Stories connected these stones to the sea and the sky. And honestly, if you found a gemstone that looks like tropical water frozen into a rock, you'd probably think it was magical too. Unfortunately, much of the Taíno culture was devastated after European colonization. When Christopher Columbus arrived on Hispaniola in 1492, the course of the island's history changed forever. Within a few decades, much of the indigenous population had been wiped out by disease, warfare, and forced labor. Countless stories, traditions, and knowledge disappeared with them, which means we'll probably never know exactly what the Taíno thought about the mysterious blue stones found in their homeland. The true beauty and storyline of this stone lost forever, but still found rich with the impact that it made on their culture. And if you were to fast forward now, all the way to 1916, to the first recorded discovery, a Spanish priest named Father Miguel Domingo Fuertes Loren was walking along the shoreline near Barahona. And at some point, he encountered an unusual blue stone, these same stones that the Taíno people had known long, long before. But now, after all this time, a Spanish priest has found himself standing on the same beaches with the same stone in his hand, not knowing the history that it held. And local residents reportedly told him that the stones came from the sea. Now, Father Loren wasn't just a priest. He was also interested in natural history. So naturally, he became curious. Where were these stones coming from? Were there more? Could they be mined? He submitted a request to the Dominican government, asking for permission to explore and develop the source. And the government basically said, no, thank you. At the time, nobody really understood what the stone was. And, who is this guy? What's he trying to do? What's his point? So they basically just X-nayed that. And the significance wasn't recognized. The request was denied. And just like that, Larimar disappears from history again for decades. Lost and once again found. For more than 40 years, almost nothing happened. And then in 1967, villagers discovered more blue stones washing up on local beaches. People became curious. Where are they coming from? Some residents began following rivers upstream, looking for the stones. Imagine that for a second. You find a beautiful blue gemstone on a beach. Instead of opening Google Maps, you literally follow the river into the mountains, hoping it leads you to treasure. And that is what happened. But the mystery still wasn't fully solved. Not yet. The official discovery came even later, 1974. A local jeweler named Miguel Mendez was handed an unusual blue stone by a customer. She told him she had found it on the beach, and Mendez wasn't convinced the beach was the original source. He hadn't seen this stone before. He was interested, and she seemed to have just found it and decided it would make a great jewelry piece. He decided to ask more questions. He suspected that the stone must have come from somewhere inland. So he teamed up with a Peace Corps volunteer named Norman Ryland. Together, they began searching, and eventually, they traced the stones back into the Volcanoes Mountains. And there, they discovered the primary deposit, the source of Larimar, the location that would eventually become the famous Los Chupaderos mine, the world's only major Larimar deposit. Discovered in 1975, the same year of the first Saturday Night Live episode, and the blockbuster release of Jaws. It's fairly recent, and this stone had a history of being found and forgotten. And now, late 1900s, we finally have the source, all because one woman found a stone on the beach, decided it was pretty enough to wear, and brought it to a jeweler who asked the right questions and knew the right people. At first discovery, the gemstone was given another name than Larimar. It was called Travelina. Beautiful, but it kind of sounds like a cruise ship rather than a gemstone, and thankfully it didn't stick. Mendez eventually created a new name. He combined the name of his daughter, Larissa, with the Spanish word mar, meaning to sea. Larissa, Mar, Larimar. And honestly, I think it's perfect. The stone literally looks like the ocean. Now, let's talk about the weird stuff, because every great gemstone seems to attract myth. And Larimar is attached to one of the biggest myths out there, the lost oceanic city of Atlantis. The story became popular because of a man named Edgar Cayce. Cayce was a famous American clairvoyant who made numerous predictions during the early 1900s. Among those predictions was the claim that evidence of Atlantis would eventually become discovered in the Caribbean region. So when a stunning blue gemstone was discovered in the Dominican Republic, decades later, people started connecting dots, and Cayce claimed that prophecy. Maybe the dots weren't actually connected, but still, the theory spread. And soon, Larimar became known as the Atlantis Stone. Some believers claimed it contained ancient wisdom. Others claimed it was remnants of the lost civilization itself. Is there scientific evidence? Absolutely not. But let's be honest, if Atlantis were real, Larimar does kind of look like the gemstone they used for their royal jewelry. And I'm all about a good myth. Today, Larimar still comes from the same region where it was officially discovered. The mining area covers only a tiny section of the Dominican Republic, a mountainside. The deposit they discovered wasn't spread across the entire country, wasn't even spread across the large mountainside. The most important outcrop of blue pectolite sits in a place called Los Chupaderos, in the Los Chechesese section of the Bohoruco Mountains, roughly 6 miles or 10 kilometers southwest of the city Bejarano. And this is where the story starts to feel almost unreal. Imagine a single rainforest covered mountainside. Now imagine that mountainside perforated by roughly 2,000 vertical mining shafts, each dug in pursuit of pockets of blue stone hidden inside ancient volcanic rock. From above, the mountainside resembles a giant honeycomb carved into the jungle. Surrounding the shafts are piles of blue-tinted mine tailings, created splashes of color against the lush green rainforest vegetation. And remember, this entire global supply of Larimar comes from this one mountainside. So that's it, which means every piece of Larimar you've ever seen, a tiny fragment of one of the most geographically restricted gemstone deposits on Earth. And mining it isn't easy. The terrain is steep, the deposits occur in unpredictable pockets, heavy rain can create dangerous conditions, and most extraction remains artisanal, meaning miners still do much of the work by hand. In fact, Dominican law requires local involvement in mining rights, helping ensure profits remain connected to local communities. That's something I love to see in the gemstone stories, because so many gems leave their country of origin without local communities receiving much benefit. But Larimar is one of the few examples where local miners remain deeply connected to the industry. And I think it makes carrying one of these stones feel more impactful, feel more connection to its place of origin, because the people who helped mine it were the people who came from that same land. I think that's pretty special. That's another reason collectors have become obsessed with Larimar recently: supply concern. In recent years, safety issues, including reports of dangerous gases in mining areas, have led to significant disruptions in mining operations. Whenever a gemstone only comes from one place, and access to that place becomes limited, prices tend to rise, and fast. And that's exactly what happened with high-quality Larimar, particularly the deep blue material. The better the color, the harder it is to replace, because there's literally no other source. And working with Larimar isn't always easy. Even though the stone has a fibrous structure that gives it a decent toughness, it can still be prone to breakage during cutting. Because of that, most Larimar isn't faceted. Instead, it's cut into cabochon, smooth, polished shapes that showcase its color and pattern. That's how I wear it in these beautiful round cabochons. Carvings are common, beads are common, free-form pieces are common, but faceted Larimar is relatively rare. The stone simply looks better when cutters allow the patterns to do the talking. And honestly, if I had a piece that looks like a tropical wave frozen in stone, I wouldn't want to cover it with 100 facets either. I want to wear it showcasing that piece in the ocean captured in the stone. Like many blue gemstones, Larimar has developed a reputation in crystal healing communities. People associate it with calmness, communication, emotional healing, and the throat chakra. Some believe it helps people speak their truths. Others associate it with love, relationships, and deeper connections. Now, whether you believe any of that is entirely up to you. But I do think it's interesting how humans consistently look at blue stones and think, yep, that's the one that feels peaceful. Maybe it's because blue reminds us of open skies. Maybe it's because it reminds us of water. Or maybe we're all just hardwired to stare at pretty rocks and make up stories about them. Which honestly might be one of humanity's most charming traits, if you ask me. Now, when you strip away the myth, the Atlantis stories, the psychic prophecies, the crystal healing claims, Larimar is still incredible. It's a gemstone that exists in exactly one place. A stone born from ancient Caribbean volcanoes, discovered, forgotten, rediscovered, and transformed into a symbol of an entire nation. A gem that looks like the ocean but came from fire. And I think that's what makes it so special. Because sometimes reality turns out to be just as fascinating as mythology. So the next time you see a piece of Larimar jewelry, remember, you're looking at a gemstone that traveled from volcanic fire to tropical rivers to Caribbean beaches, before eventually ending up in someone's collection. Not bad for a little blue rock. Well, until next time, this is all for today's stone story. Tune in next week. Next episode is sure to be a gem.